Look closely at the skin on your hand, because less than 10,000 years ago, the extremely fair skin we associate with Northwestern Europeans today barely existed. How did a founding human population, which was entirely dark-skinned, transform into the incredibly diverse spectrum of shades we see today? What invisible, ruthless force rewired our genetics so completely that it reshaped our physical appearance across multiple continents? The answer is not a random roll of the cosmic dice. It is a dramatic, slow-motion survival negotiation between your ancient ancestors and a surprisingly brutal star sitting 93 million miles away. This is a story about cancer, ancient farmers, ice ages, and a desperate biological struggle for survival. If you trace the human family tree all the way back to its roots, you will find one undeniable truth. Every single one of your distant ancestors had dark skin. Not just a majority of them, but absolutely all of them. Around 300,000 years ago, when the first members of our species appeared in Africa, the entire population was dark-skinned. The concept of pale skin did not exist anywhere on the planet. Every ancient civilization, every mythological figure, and every cave painter traces their lineage back to a founding group that looked entirely different from a massive portion of the modern human race. This means that at some specific point in our history, a monumental shift occurred. To understand this profound change, we first need to understand what skin actually does. Many people treat their skin as if it were mere packaging for their organs. In reality, your skin is your largest organ, and it is performing nearly 47 different critical jobs right at this very moment. One of its most vital responsibilities is defending you from ultraviolet radiation. Ultraviolet radiation is the invisible, relentless energy that the sun fires at our planet every second. This energy breaks chemical bonds, damages your DNA, and causes dangerous cellular mutations. If these mutations accumulate over time, they can develop into melanoma, which is one of the most aggressive forms of skin cancer. This is exactly where the biology of skin color steps in to save our lives. The pigment responsible for your skin tone is called melanin. Melanin acts as a permanent, built-in biological sunscreen. The more melanin your skin produces, the darker it appears, and the better it blocks ultraviolet radiation from reaching the deeper layers of your tissue. In equatorial Africa, sitting directly under some of the most intense ultraviolet radiation on Earth, evolution had a very clear preference. Dark skin was rapidly and aggressively selected for because it offered an incredibly effective shield. Having more melanin meant your DNA was protected, your cancer risk was lowered, and you lived long enough to pass your genes to the next generation. However, the sun was not just attacking the surface of the skin. Ultraviolet radiation also penetrates deep enough to destroy a small, invisible, and critically important molecule in your bloodstream called folate. Folate is a form of vitamin B9, and it is absolutely essential for early embryonic development. Without sufficient folate during the first few weeks of pregnancy, a developing neural tube can fail to close properly. This leads to catastrophic consequences, like severe developmental abnormalities and miscarriages. In a sun-drenched environment, with no shelter and no artificial sunscreen, ultraviolet exposure was constant and unavoidable. Pregnant women with lighter skin experienced higher rates of folate destruction, leading to fewer surviving children. Therefore, dark skin was a powerful, multi-purpose biological superweapon. It blocked cancer, and it protected pregnant women, making it an absolute requirement for the survival of early humans in Africa. If dark skin was perfectly optimized over hundreds of thousands of years, why did it ever change? The explanation lies in one of the most elegant and brutal biological trade-offs in evolutionary history. Between 70,000 and 100,000 years ago, small groups of early humans began a slow, generational migration out of Africa. Over thousands of years, they drifted through the Middle East, across Asia, into Europe, and eventually reached the Americas. As these groups migrated further north, the fundamental nature of their environment shifted. At higher latitudes, sunlight hits the Earth at a much lower angle and passes through more of the atmosphere. The intense, relentless ultraviolet radiation of the equator was replaced by weak, intermittent sunlight, and long, dark winters. Suddenly, the dark skin that had been a perfect shield in Africa became a massive liability. The problem was not cancer, and it was certainly not folate destruction. The new deadly crisis was a severe lack of vitamin D. Your skin operates like a biological solar panel, using sunlight to synthesize vitamin D from a compound inside your body. Vitamin D is completely fundamental to human health because it regulates the absorption of calcium in your gut. Without vitamin D, your bones cannot mineralize properly. In children, this deficiency causes rickets, a devastating disease that softens bones and permanently stunts growth. In adult women, severe deficiency leads to a condition that softens pelvic bones, making childbirth extraordinarily dangerous and frequently fatal. When dark-skinned populations lived in the overcast environments of northern Europe 40,000 years ago, their highly efficient melanin blocked the tiny amount of ultraviolet light they desperately needed. Their bones weakened, their immune systems failed, and their populations began to decline. In a primitive world without medical interventions or fortified foods, this was a multi-generational death sentence. Faced with this new threat, the ruthless calculator of natural selection reversed its entire strategy. Random genetic mutations that reduced the production of melanin began to appear and spread through these northern populations. Individuals with slightly lighter skin could synthesize slightly more vitamin D, which gave them healthier bones and a higher chance of surviving childbirth. Generation after generation, the average skin tone of northern populations drifted lighter because it kept more people alive. For a long time, scientists believed this fading process took hundreds of thousands of years. However, recent ancient DNA analysis has completely shattered that assumption. Early European hunter-gatherers lived in the north for tens of thousands of years, while retaining significantly dark skin. A famous 10,000-year-old specimen from Britain, known as Cheddar Man, had dark skin and blue eyes. The highly sensitive pale skin we see today only became widespread across Europe within the last 6,000 to 8,000 years. This shockingly recent and rapid change was triggered by the Neolithic Revolution, which was the human transition from hunting to farming. Hunter-gatherers consumed a varied diet rich in fatty fish and organ meats, which naturally provided them with significant amounts of vitamin D. When humans switched to agriculture, their diets became heavily reliant on carbohydrate-rich cereals like wheat and barley. Their dietary intake of vitamin D completely collapsed. Populations were suddenly almost entirely dependent on whatever tiny amount of vitamin D their skin could manufacture from the weak northern sun. The evolutionary pressure for lighter skin intensified dramatically almost overnight. Furthermore, farming communities were large, dense, and sedentary. In these dense networks of villages, a beneficial genetic mutation for lighter skin could spread through thousands of people in just a few generations. The combination of a collapsing dietary source of vitamin D and high population density essentially hit the fast-forward button on human depigmentation. What makes this biological journey even more fascinating is that skin color is not controlled by a single, simple gene. It is a highly complex trait regulated by dozens of different genes working together in harmony. Incredibly, different human populations discovered the exact same solution using completely different genetic pathways. Both East Asians and Europeans evolved significantly lighter skin than their African ancestors. However, the specific genetic mutations responsible for lighter skin in East Asians are almost entirely different from those found in Europeans. This phenomenon is known as convergent evolution. Natural selection found the same life-saving answer multiple times, independently, across separate continents. When biological evolution repeatedly invents the same solution from scratch, it is the ultimate proof that the trait is absolutely critical for survival. Alongside these massive shifts in skin tone, another mind-bending genetic mutation occurred roughly 6,000 to 10,000 years ago near the Black Sea. Every single person alive today who has blue eyes is descended from one single individual who carried a specific mutation. Before that singular moment in history, every human being on the planet had brown eyes. This mutation slowly reduced melanin production specifically in the iris, And it spread rapidly because it was likely linked to the heavily favored genes for lighter skin. Traits like blue eyes and pale skin feel ancient and primordial to us today. Yet, in the grand timeline of human history, they are biologically brand new. When we take a step back and look at the full picture, the truth becomes undeniable. The concept of skin color has been used to shape political systems, divide humanity, and justify atrocities for millennia. But at its core, skin color is nothing more than a biological ultraviolet calibration system. It is merely your body making its best ancestral guess about how much sunlight protection you need based on where your distant relatives lived and what they ate. Light skin is not inherently better or more advanced. In equatorial environments, light skin is actively dangerous and represents a massive survival disadvantage. Dark skin is not primitive. It is the original ancestral baseline configuration of our entire species. The deepest irony of human history is that the exact same sun drove all of these changes. It forced some populations to develop more melanin to survive its destructive power, while forcing others to develop less melanin to capture its limited energy. The sun did not pick sides. It simply radiated energy, while evolution silently sorted out the survivors. Humanity built entire civilizations based on prejudice and hierarchy, all revolving around a simple vitamin D problem and a calcium absorption issue. The forces of evolution are still quietly running in the background today. Modern technology, from vitamin supplements to global food access, has temporarily changed the inputs of our survival algorithm. We cannot predict how the human species will look 100,000 years from now. But we can say with absolute certainty that every shade of skin on Earth today is a masterpiece of survival. Every color is the product of an ancient African population spreading across an unpredictable world. Every single skin tone is simply a biological answer to a question asked by a star, and every single answer was perfectly correct.